It is fully the end of the world.
So far, we've been averaging 9 miles an hour.
Is diesel dead? Or could it make more sense to you than a petrol car?
There's no doubt about it, diesel sales have been in decline for a long time now.
But diesel does have some advantages over petrol, and they haven't changed. So it might not be popular right now, but is that really justified? Should you still be considering a diesel today?
To find out exactly what the difference in costs can be between a petrol and a diesel car, we're going to be doing a long motorway journey and some miles in town, and then we're going to crunch some numbers and tell you our results. So Doug, what is the plan for today?
Well, you are in a diesel Peugeot 5008. I am in a petrol Peugeot 5008. We're starting in London and we've brimmed both tanks. Then we're going to do a big motorway journey covering probably around 180 or 190 miles, finishing back in London, where we're going to brim both tanks so we can work out exactly how much fuel both cars used and then how much it cost us as well. And tomorrow we're going to do the same thing on a town route instead.
And it appears we're being followed by a white SUV. What is all that about?
Yes, well, your diesel 5008 and my petrol 5008 both cost around about £40,000. There isn't a fully electric version of this car, but if you had the same budget and you did want a fully electric SUV, then you might be considering one of the best-selling cars in the country, which is the Tesla Model Y. So we've got one following us along on this test to give us some electric context so we can crunch those numbers as well. So Will, you're in the diesel 5008. What typically are the advantages for someone choosing a diesel car over a petrol car?
Well, the most obvious one that won't probably come as a surprise to anyone is you get better fuel economy, generally speaking, from a diesel car compared with a petrol. So this car I'm driving can officially do 54.1 miles per gallon. What can yours do, Doug?
Well, the official fuel economy in this car is 46.4 miles per gallon.
There you go, so quite a bit better. And then you've also got lower CO2 emissions from the diesel as well. So on a global level, there are actually some environmental benefits for choosing a diesel over a petrol car. Diesel cars also tend to last a bit longer, or at least their engines do, and they produce more torque, particularly at low revs.
Okay, but it's not a perfect fuel, is it? So what are the kind of drawbacks for going for a diesel?
No, it's not. So diesel per litre costs more than petrol in the UK. So you've got to factor that in when you're considering overall running costs, and diesel cars are more expensive than equivalent petrols too. You've also got some other emissions which aren't quite so nice from diesels, so they generally tend to produce more NOx, and traditionally speaking, although that has changed a bit over the last few years, more particulate emissions as well.
Okay, so your 5008 should be more economical than mine in the real world, but it costs more at the pumps. So I wonder really what the difference in price will be for this journey at the end of it.
Right, okay, so we've just rejoined the M4 back towards London. We've done 85 miles already, and it's really a carbon copy all the way back to London. And then we'll brim the tank and work out how much this all cost.
So Will, we're on the way back now. What's your trip computer saying you're getting in terms of fuel economy?
Well, if it is to be believed, it is showing 60 miles per gallon on the nose. Obviously, long motorway journey, theoretically ideal conditions for a diesel, but that is certainly a pretty good figure.
So that's even better than the claimed figure for the car, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, I'm doing a bit less than the claimed figure. I'm getting 45.5 miles per gallon, and that's over the 137 miles that we've done so far.
Still pretty good though.
Still pretty good, I'd say. For a big, heavy SUV like this, with a 1.2 litre, 3-cylinder petrol engine, that's not bad.
Right, here's the receipt. Let's crunch some numbers.
Before we do that, it's time for day 2. So would you believe it, diesel is more economical than petrol on a long motorway journey. That's quite an obvious conclusion to draw, but the numbers and the costs are really quite interesting to compare. We're going to do that at the end of this video, but for now, it's the next day, we're in town, and Will, what's the plan?
Well, the plan today is to drive from Twickenham across London, and we're going to end up in Tottenham. It's a route of around about 20 miles, mostly stop-start driving, so a completely different type of environment to yesterday. And that is going to give us a basis to compare the costs of these cars in more urban environments.
And just like yesterday, we've got the cars in their normal driving modes. We've got air conditioning set to 21 degrees, automatic. We're driving as smoothly as we can and sticking to speed limits as well. So yesterday on the motorway, the diesel did have quite a big advantage. Do you think that's still going to be the case in town?
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion it will be a bit closer, but I think the real efficiency champion today might well be the electric car that's following us.
So Will, it's been a thrilling morning and we have finally made it to central London, but even without factoring in what we're going to have to spend on fuel versus what the Model Y is going to have to spend on electricity, we just know it's going to be a much more expensive day for us, don't we?
We do, and that's because it's only fully electric cars these days that are exempt from the London congestion charge. So all petrols and diesels and plug-in hybrids as well, actually, have to pay £15 a day just to drive in London.
Luckily though, we won't have to spend even more money on the ultra-low emission zone charge, will we?
We won't. So if you buy a brand new petrol or a diesel, or one that's only a few years old, then you will be exempt from that. But if you drive an older petrol or diesel, then you might have to pay £12.50 a day on top of the congestion charge. So you could be paying £27.50 a day just to drive in the city.
But Will, that is a bargain when you consider the pure enjoyment and thrills that we've had driving around London this morning.
Well, it has been amazing. Weather fantastic today. Look out there, grey, some rain on the windows. It's at the moment 9 degrees, so pretty warm. And it's the speed of it that I think impresses me most, because so far, and this doesn't include a stop for lunch, we've been averaging 9 miles an hour from Twickenham. So I could have ridden a bike and paid nothing and not had a car and not spent 40 grand on the thing to start with, and I would have got there quicker.
Well, I've been averaging 8 miles an hour. So you're going...
That's because I'm in a diesel and it's faster.
I wish I could average 9 miles an hour. And just on our right there, one of the worst football stadiums on the planet. So we won't stick around here for long. We will leave as soon as possible. So 2 thrilling days of driving, and now we've got the numbers to crunch and go through. And we're going to talk about day 1 first, where we were on the motorway. We did about 188 miles, and in the Petrol 5008, I needed 19.75 litres, which cost me £28.82 on the day, and meant I did 43.2 miles to the gallon. What about the diesel?
Well, I needed 14.35 litres diesel for the same journey. So even though diesel is more expensive per litre at the pumps, because I needed less of it, it meant I averaged 59.7 mpg, and the trip cost me £22.08. Do you have the numbers for the Model Y?
Yes, I do. So the Model Y needed 55.57 kilowatt hours of electricity for that same journey, meaning that it averaged around 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, which, considering it was on the motorway and pretty cold, is fairly good. And if you charged up at home at the price cap of 29 pence per kilowatt hour, then you would have to pay about £16.11 for that journey, which is a lot cheaper than the other 2 cars. And of course, we do know some people might have even cheaper tariffs than that, which would have brought the cost even further down.
But what if you couldn't charge at home?
Well, yes, you'd imagine on this kind of journey, most people would end up at home. But let's just say you couldn't, and you needed to charge at a Tesla supercharger, which we know are all brilliant, very fast, very reliable, and very reasonably priced compared to all other public chargers. And let's say you spent 52 pence per kilowatt hour at that supercharger. It's very difficult to get an average price for a supercharger because Tesla moves the pricing around depending on the time of day and how many chargers are in use, that kind of thing. But let's say 52 pence per kilowatt hour, that journey would have set you back £28.89, which is the most expensive of the 3 cars. And that is from a very reasonably priced charger, which we know Shell Recharge, Ionity would have cost far more money than that. But anyway, let's move on to day 2, where we were in town. We did 22 miles at much lower speeds. We were averaging about 9 miles per hour, which wasn't very nice. And on day 1, our average speed was almost 60 miles an hour. So in the Petrol in town, I needed 5.2 litres exactly, which was 19.2 miles per gallon, and it cost me £7.38. So what about the diesel?
Well, I needed 3.97 litres of diesel, which averaged out at 25 mpg, and that cost me £5.95 on the day. And the Model Y?
So that needed 8.61 kilowatt hours, which was 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is quite surprising because you would assume electric cars, in terms of efficiency, are already in that element at low speeds around town. But 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour in town versus 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour on the motorway, why is there such a big difference there?
Well, yes, you're right that at lower speeds, electric cars are generally speaking more efficient. But this is an extreme example. This is going through central London. So it's continuous stop-start. You're not really building any momentum. You're going at very low average speeds. And all this time, you are heating in the interior while not putting many miles on the clock. So that's why the miles per kilowatt hour reading seems quite low. On a summer's day or in a less extreme environment on a normal town or a city, then that figure will be quite a bit higher.
Sure. And when it comes to the cost of that trip, then charging up at home, again at the price cap, is only £2.49 to cover those miles. Or if you used a supercharger, a less tempting £4.47, but still, in this instance, cheaper than the fuel bills in the other two cars. And remember, the Model Y didn't have to pay congestion charge, so even before you factor in the cost of fuel, it was onto a winner even before we started. So, what conclusions do we draw from this test? Diesel is cheaper than petrol?
Well, in this instance, yes. And with pretty much exactly the same car, one with a petrol engine, one with a diesel engine, the fuel economy is almost certainly going to be better, regardless of the type of journey you're doing, whether you're in town or whether you're doing long motorway trips. So even though diesel is more expensive at the pumps, your fuel bills will likely overall be lower.
So if there's a choice, like there is with the 5008, of going for a version of that car with a petrol engine or a diesel engine, should you always go for diesel?
Well, the diesel 5008, and this is the case in most instances, is more expensive to buy outright than the petrol. It costs about £2,000 more if you're paying cash, or a little bit more than £100 a month extra on a PCP finance deal. So let's talk very hypothetically and say if you did 10,000 miles a year and your petrol car was averaging 40 mpg, your diesel was averaging 55 mpg, then if you bought the diesel, it would still take you about 5 years before you've earned back that extra cost in fuel savings.
Okay, so you've got to be a very high mileage driver for it to really make sense straight away for you in that instance. But there are also other things to factor into that decision as well, like residual value. And traditionally it was the case that diesels would hold on to their values better than petrols, but we've seen the data for these 5008s that we had, and in equivalent trim levels it's actually the petrol that holds on to its value better than the diesel. So we're seeing a reversal of what that trend used to be. And something else that people might want to consider when they're choosing the fuel that powers their car is the fact that there's this perception around diesel that they're terrible for the environment, terrible for the planet, terrible for people's lungs. Is all of that absolutely accurate though?
Well, carbon dioxide or CO2 in the atmosphere is warming the planet, and that's one of the causes of climate change. But diesels actually emit less CO2 than petrols on average. However, diesels do tend to emit more NOx and particulate emissions, and these things can cause heart problems and respiratory illnesses in some people, which is one of the reasons we've seen cities like London introduce the ultra-low emissions zone to really try and force fuel-powered cars out of urban areas where people are most likely to be affected by that type of pollution. But the thing to really stress here is that while older diesels were very bad for particulate and NOx emissions, some of the latest diesels are much, much better, although still on average, they are worse than equivalent petrol.
Okay, so what we're saying is if you are a very high mileage driver and you've done your maths and you're looking for a new car now, then diesel can still be an attractive option for you.
Well, yes, it might cost more to buy outright than an equivalent petrol, but the fuel bills are almost certainly going to be cheaper. And if we're talking about comparisons with an electric car, then you won't have to worry about using the patchy public charging infrastructure, although admittedly on this particular test, because we had a Tesla in there which has access to the company's supercharger network, that would be less of an inconvenience for you.
Okay, so what we're saying is there clearly are benefits of going for a diesel engine today if you're a high mileage driver looking for a new car. But if it is exhaust pipe emissions that you're very focused on and very concerned about, then obviously of the three cars we had on this test, it's the electric car which is the best option.
Absolutely.
So, of course, diesel is more efficient than petrol. That was well established before this test, but is the difference in running costs what you were expecting? Tell us in the comments below. To see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel, and for a great deal on your next car, whether it's a petrol, diesel, electric, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or mild hybrid, go to whatcar.com.